Hi guys, I'm Rick Naqvi with PreSonus Audio, and I'm here to show you the brand new Studio 192 recording interface. The Studio 192 is a USB 3.0 recording interface, and it supports very high sample rates up to 192K. So on all 8 analog inputs, you can do 192K, but you can also do up to 96K on 18 simultaneous inputs and outputs, or on 44.1 or 48K, you can do up to 26 simultaneous inputs with 32 outputs. Now, one of the things that makes the Studio 192 really unique is the fact that we have a DSP chip on board that handles all of the monitor mixing with near zero latency. So what that means is each musician can have their own customized headphone mix with effects. So you have compressor, limiter, gate, or what we call the fat channel on every one of the inputs. Plus you also have a stereo digital reverb and a stereo digital delay, and each mix has a separate level control for those effects as well. So the other thing that makes the Studio 192 really cool is the fact that we are featuring the brand new X-Max digitally recallable mic preamplifiers. So each of the 8 mic preamps have separate level control, 48 volt phantom power, phase reverse, and all of these settings can be recalled at a later time. So it's great because if you do a session and then a month later you need to recut something, you can recall those settings for that session and it'll come back exactly like when the day that you first tracked it. So the other thing that's really great about the Studio 192 is that it's compatible with all of the major recording software out there. So no matter if you're using Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, Ableton, whatever, it's fully Core Audio compliant and ASIO compatible. But we've also done some really cool integration with Studio One. So if you are a Studio One user, there's some really cool integration within the software that we'll take a look at in a few minutes. But first of all, let's take a look at the front panel and the back panel. So the first thing you'll notice on the Studio 192 is this really cool blue power button. And the blue LED that surrounds the power button will turn red if you don't have sync with the computer. As soon as you sync with the computer, it'll turn blue, letting you know everything's good. And then the next thing you see are 2 potentiometers for your headphone amplifier. So you have 2 separate headphone amps, both with their own individual streams. So each of the 2 musicians that are using these will have unique mixes and have their own level control. Next is the big blue main potentiometer, and this controls your studio monitors in the control room. And of course you've got LEDs right here to show you the main level. Next you have nice LED meters for each of the 8 analog inputs, plus a 48 volt phantom power indicator here. So if I engage phantom power, let's say on channel 1, you see it turns red. I can go to channel 2, turn it on. So basically any channels with phantom power, you'll see the very top LED turn blue. Okay, the next thing that you have kind of in the center are all of the controls for the mic preamps and sort of your control room parameters. So basically this knob right here controls the level of any selected mic preamp. So if I want to turn up the volume of preamp 1, I can use the left and right arrow buttons to just find preamp 1, and now I can turn up the level. If I need to go to preamp 8, I just kind of go over with the arrow buttons to preamp 8 and I can change the level control. Okay, now on the right side here you've got some other controls for kind of control room. There's a built-in omnidirectional microphone built on the front panel, and you have a talkback button that engages that microphone. And of course, if you don't want to use the built-in mic, you can also designate a different microphone preamp to be your talkback mic input, and you do that from the software, and we'll show you that in a second. The next thing you have is dim mute control for your studio monitors, and also a mono button that allows you to check your mix from stereo to mono. So now let's take a look at the back panel. So on the back panel you have preamp inputs 3 through 8, so these are XLR inputs, and then you also have balanced tip ring sleeve inputs for line level input. Now these actually go straight to the ADD converter. They bypass the mic preamp circuit completely. Now, the 1/4 inches on the front panel are actually instrument level, and they will have some gain control on them, but the back panel 1/4 inches are fully line level, and they basically give you straight to the A to D converter. So if you have any external mic preamps that you want to use, you can patch them in this way and not double preamp it, basically. Okay, the next thing you have are 8 line level outputs, and each of these are controllable via software, which we'll see in a second, and then a separate set of main outputs. So altogether you have 10 analog outputs, and each of these have a separate stream. So the main output doesn't basically copy any of the other outputs. It's actually a separate bus. And of course, next you have BNC input and output, so you can externally clock the Studio 192 from an external clock, or you can send master word clock out of this BNC to any other preamps that you have that are digital. And then next you have a SPDIF stereo digital input and output on RCA. And then you have 16 channels of ADAT light pipe inputs and outputs. Also, if you're running at 96K, you can do up to 8 channels of 96K using these ADAT inputs and outputs. And then lastly, you've got your USB 3.0 connector and your power adapter input right here. Now, if your computer doesn't have USB 3.0, if you're still on USB 2.0, no problem. The Studio 192 will work with USB 2.0 as well. Just check the website for the compatibility to make sure that your computer has the correct operating system and is fast enough. So now let's take a look at UC Surface, which is the control software for the Studio 192. Okay, so this is UC Surface, and this is our control software for not only the Studio 192, but also for the Studio Live AI and RM mixers. So those of you that have used those before will find this kind of familiar. So of course, I can have this loaded on my Mac or PC, and I can control all of the parameters of the Studio 192, but also if you have an iPad, I can have it on my iPad as well, and I can wirelessly control the Studio 192. So as you can see, let's say if I'm doing a vocal overdub in the vocal booth and I need a little bit more gain from my microphone, I can just pop open the mic pre level, and as you can see, I'm controlling the hardware wirelessly, which is really cool. Okay, so back to the software. As you can see, I'm selected on the main output. So if this main button is pressed on, then basically I can control what I'm hearing in the control room. And everything down on faders are all of my 26 inputs, plus I have 8 playback streams coming from the DAW and effects. So if I want to hear the effects in the control room, I can have these up or I can turn them down without affecting any of my musicians. So that's really cool. Now, as you can see with your DAW playback streams, these are your playback streams coming from your DAW, and they're defaulting to mono, but we can make them stereo as well. So just select, let's say DAW output 1, I can hit this link button right here, and once I hit link, now we have a stereo return coming from the DAW that I can blend in. So I can hear playback and blend it in with what I'm hearing as far as the live inputs. Okay, so next we have different mixes. So as you can see, to the right side, you've got all of your different outputs here, and if I want to send, let's say, a mix to mix output 1, 2, just click on the mix output 1, 2, and now you can see all the faders move, and I can have a separate mix for mix 1, 2 as for mix 3, 4, and so you can see very easy. I can kind of flip through the different mixes and give each musician a separate mix of all of the inputs plus the outputs plus even the effects right here. Okay, and another thing that's kind of cool is you have the ability to copy a mix. So let's say I have a nice mix happening in the control room and I just want to kind of copy this mix to all of my other mixes or to a particular headphone mix for an artist. All I do is go to this copy mix button, and once I hit copy mix, I can select which mix I want to copy the main mix to, and then I hit paste and wabam, done. Now we have the exact same mix on a couple of these. Okay, now above you will see on all of my analog inputs and my first 8 ADAT inputs, I have a full fat channel that's available to me. So as you can see here, Of course, I've got my preamp control right here, so I can control the mic pre. As you can see, if I'm doing this, you can look at the hardware. I'm actually controlling the hardware. And of course, I have 48 volt phantom power. I can turn on and off, phase reverse for that channel. I've got a noise gate, a compressor, and a fully parametric EQ as well. And again, this is on every single input, so I can go ahead and kind of, create this. And if I like this, I can actually print this fat channel to my DAW as well. So in addition to having the fat channel on every single input, I also have the ability to have 2 different effects processors that I can monitor with, so each musician can have their own individual effects. So if I hit effects A, you can see I hit the effects edit button, which is right there on the master effects output fader. And when I hit this, I can select from different room reverbs, hall reverbs. Here's a large hall, and you've got all your parameters here that you can change. And effects B, if I hit effects B, you can see I have different delay settings right here: stereo delay, filter delay, ping pong. And with any of the delays, I also have a tap tempo button available right here. Now, to the right of this kind of section right here, you've got this little bitty arrow button right on the right-hand side of the main fader. And if I hit this arrow, it pops open some more parameters. So I have the ability to have tap tempo for my delay right here. And I also can mute my effects with just a touch of a button. And also I have my talkback control. So talkback is really cool because remember, on the front panel of the Studio 192, you've got the built-in talkback mic. And what's cool is I've got this talk assign button right here. And what talk assign does is it lets me talk to only certain musicians, or I can talk to all of them. So when you click talk assign, you can see all of the outputs are selected. But I can basically, let's say I only want to communicate with the musician that's on headphone 2. See, I can deselect all of these. And now, basically, when I hit talkback, it'll only engage headphone 2. But if I want to talk to more people, I can just select the ones I want to talk back to and just hit talkback, and it'll do that. Another cool thing about the way that the talkback works is that if I click my mouse once and let go, it will basically latch the talkback on. So that way I can talk to the musicians. So just click it once, it'll kind of latch, and I can be talking back to them, and then when I want it to disengage, I just click it again. But if I click and hold talkback, it will basically work kind of as a momentary. It doesn't latch. So I can just, okay, check 1, 2, hey, we're going to take it again from the bridge, and then let go, and now we're not on the talkback. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you are some of the really cool settings that you have. So the other thing that's great about the Studio 192 is that we have built-in speaker management. So if you have multiple studio monitors, you can hit this in the speaker management section. You can kind of have a couple of different settings. So if I have 3 different sets of studio monitors, let's say I've got a set of smaller monitors on my main output, and then on outputs 1 and 2 I've got some mid-size ones, and then I've got some really big ones on output C. I can go ahead and have basically this speaker management first selection, and now what that does is it allows me to have basically a toggle between all of my studio monitors. Now this is really cool on the iPad because you could just have your iPad kind of up, and you can switch between monitors when you're mixing. Now we also have another setting that's pretty cool. If you have a subwoofer on output C, which would be outputs 3 and 4, you can have this second setting. And what the second setting does is it basically lets outputs A and B be mutually exclusive, and output C, which would be your subwoofer, could be used with A or B. So what that means is A and B, I can use them individually, and then if I want to hear A with the sub, I can have that, or B with the sub. And this basically works exactly like the central station and the monitor station, which are 2 other products that PreSonus makes that allow you to switch speakers really easily. And then lastly, if I'm mixing in surround, you have this last setting, A plus B plus C. And what that does is it allows me to have all of my outputs working simultaneously and controllable from the main knob. So basically, if I have a 5.1 kind of surround setup, I can have all of these selected and just have one control for them. Okay. To the left of that section, you also have the ability right here to be able to designate which mix each of the built-in headphone amplifiers are listening to. So let's say headphone 1, I want that to come from mix 1 and 2, and headphone 2, I want that coming from mix 7 and 8. So if you want one of the headphone outputs to be a mirror of what you're hearing in the control room, you could change it to main mix, for example. And then, of course, you have right here also a selection for what you want to come out of the SPDIF main output. So I can reference any of the outputs or also the main mix coming out of SPDIF. Okay, so basically what I've shown you so far is how the Studio 192 is controlled using UC Surface. So if you're using any other DAW besides Studio One, so Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, any of those, you would use UC Surface to be able to control the hardware of the Studio 192. Now, if you are a Studio One user, we've got some pretty cool integration just built into Studio One so that you don't even need to manage another control application. So let's take a look at Studio One and how it integrates with the Studio 192. So if I launch Studio One, the very first thing I'm going to come to is the start page. And as you can see, I've got my Studio 192 selected right on the front as my interface. And one thing that we've done is we've created a template for the Studio 192. So of course you can create from a blank slate as well. But if I go to create a new song and I find the Studio 192 in this list right here, we've actually done a lot of this setup for you. So if you hit OK, you'll see it basically now has created a session, and it's all already automatically mapped my inputs, my outputs, and it's actually already kind of created headphone mixes and everything. So under the sends section, you can see I've got several different mixes set up. And one thing that's really cool is notice here, any mix that I have in Studio One is automatically copied to all of my headphone mixes right above it. But let's say headphone 1, you want it to have a totally separate mix. Let's say headphone 1 doesn't want any of analog 7 and 8. Well, notice right here, by each headphone mix, there's a little lock button. And what that does is it locks all of the headphone mixes to the master fader in Studio One. But if I want somebody to have a unique mix, as soon as I change it, the lock turns off. So if I unlock these two, let's say, now you can see, okay, the rest of the mixes are locked to Studio One, but these guys have unique mixes. So basically every musician can have exactly the headphone mix that they want. This little Z indicates zero latency mixing. So what that means is that it's utilizing the DSP that's on board the Studio 192. Okay, now above right here, you notice in the effects section, you have an insert section with a fat channel plugin, and you've got this blue fat channel plugin. Now, what that means is the blue fat channel plugin is the fat channel that is running in the DSP of the hardware. So if I click on this, you can see here's my, fully parametric EQ, I've got a compressor, I've got a gate, and what this is allowing me to do is without taxing my CPU, I'm able to have this DSP when I track. But here's what's really cool. Notice right below, under the inserts, there's another fat channel plugin, and this one's gray, but notice it has a little link button. This links the native plugin to what's happening in the DSP plugin. So what that means is that as soon as I'm finished tracking and I'm playing back tracks, it will automatically copy the settings from the DSP version of the fat channel to the native version of the fat channel. So basically what that means is that, okay, I get a really nice headphone mix happening for my musician in their headphones with the DSP fat channel. Well, as soon as I hit playback and they're hearing what they recorded, they're going to hear that sound exactly like what was being tracked. So it's a really great listening kind of experience, and it allows you to be able to hear with effects, not only with no latency going in, but also it switches to the native plugin. And so what's cool about this is you know, I don't have to commit to this sound. I can basically, you know, later on, it's a plugin. I can replace it with another plugin, or I can change it, or whatever. Now, if I do want to kind of commit this, you know, and actually use the Fat Channel DSP and, you know, basically record it, you also have this button right here, Apply DSP to Input Signal. And if I put that on, I'm able to actually, you know, copy that sound, and it'll actually print it to your DAW. Okay, so now you've got the ability to completely control the Studio 192's DSP, all of the Fat Channel plugins, all of the zero latency mixers kind of functions without having to leave Studio One. Okay, so that's it. The Studio 192, 26 input, 32 output, USB 3.0 recording interface. It's a great addition to any modern recording studio. Last thing I'll tell you is that we also have a really great companion piece to the Studio 192 called the Digimax DP88. And as you can see, I've got a couple of them in the rack right behind me. The DP88 is an 8-channel A to D, D to A converter. It'll give you 8 more analog inputs and outputs to your Studio 192. You can have up to 2 of them. So in 3 rack spaces right here, I've got a full 24 channels of inputs and outputs with mic preamps. The other thing that's great about the DP88 is that it also has analog inputs that bypass the mic preamps, go straight to the A to D converter. So if you have external mic pre's, this is a great way to get them into your DAW. So if you have any other questions about the Studio 192 or the DP88, please go to PreSonus.com, and thanks a lot for watching.